frankly, we need the military to become involved in these various cities. Well, we need to understand something. Gaza is not a war, Alex. It's simply mass murder with U.S. funding. Put a new government into Ukraine that would lead a crusade against Russia, because the real objective of war in Ukraine was to destroy Russia.
A storm is brewing in world politics, and the pieces on the chessboard are moving faster than ever. Strange orders, sudden deployments, and hidden agendas are unfolding right before our eyes. But the truth isn't as simple as the headlines suggest. Why would Trump summon the National Guard to D.C.? Could Iran and Israel be on the verge of open conflict? And what's really behind a U.S. warship sailing toward Venezuela? Even more, is Trump secretly stepping back from the Ukraine war? Colonel Douglas Macgregor reveals the shocking answers the media won't tell you. Stay tuned.
And you just brought up one of them, the attempt now to reverse what President Trump has tried to do in Washington, D.C. And everyone that grew up in a large city, you grew up in Dallas, I grew up in Philadelphia, everybody has watched the criminality rise for years. We've seen the homelessness. We've seen the widespread human degradation. And frankly, we need the military to become involved in these various cities. And people in the police departments who are honest will tell you we need help, just as the Border Patrol has been saying for years that they need military assistance on the border. So I think this is a travesty. This is something that President Trump has gotten very right. And I say that because recently I've been very disappointed. It seems like the swamp writes the script, he reads from it, and he doesn't seem to understand that the things that he ran on and told us he was going to do are not being done. You know, this whole
Absolutely.
thing.
Well, I mean, let's start getting into that. But since you went there, you're, obviously, understand military law and the Constitution. I've interviewed constitutional lawyers. I'm a big police state person that's covered that and worried about it. When the Democrats and the Bushes were training the military for gun confiscation, we got the secret documents. When you have local authorities run by Soros and the Democrats, stand downs, total crime, and it's in the Constitution to control the border and send in troops, this is not a martial law move, even though you're becoming more and more, and I agree with you in many aspects, a Trump critic, this idea that because I'm supporting what Trump's doing on this issue, we're now endorsing martial law. This is not martial law. Can you spend a few minutes on that? Then let's get into Ukraine, some of the bad decisions Trump's making, where you see that going, and you'll have the floor on that.
Well, you're right. It's not martial law. And the words martial law do not even exist in the United States Constitution. Martial law, whenever it's declared, is always declared locally. And that has not been declared in the District of Columbia. The point that Trump has been making is something that, I've been saying for many years, a lot of us have. Every time I would come back from overseas and land in Dulles Airport, I landed with Germans, with other Europeans, with people from the Middle East, and they were all appalled at what they saw in Washington, D.C., the crime rate, the state of the city. This is supposed to be the capital of the greatest nation in the world. And the people of Washington, D.C. are the principal victims of the criminality, the abuse, the degradation that's been going on. And they want the National Guard and the U.S. military there to straighten this out. And this is not the only place. When you talk about ICE, ICE right now is a Dixie cup trying to bail out the Titanic that's filling with water. You're not going to get anywhere with the millions and millions of illegals, the people that have crashed into our country over the last several years. With ICE, they can't do it. And again, this requires federal action. Now, there is a statute that gives the president authority to act against elements that are engaged in trying to harm or overthrow the government and national order, and that's the Insurrection Act. President Bush invoked it. President Trump could invoke it under the right circumstances. He's chosen not to do that yet. But we're on that path right now. And the Democrats, as you point out, that's exactly what they want. They are doing everything in their power to disassemble our country and our society.
Absolutely. I can pull up the August 2020 published battle plan of the Democrats, Podesta, to collapse the cities, create insurrection, bill it as racial, and then make Trump, if he would have won in 2020, it would have been stolen, send troops constitutionally and call that martial law, that then made a movie about it that came out last year with a $300 million budget called Civil War, fantasizing about the blue states coming together and marching on D.C. and killing a Trumpian figure. So the plan they had in 2020 if he'd have won, they now are trying to relaunch now. And you said it's a Dixie Cup trying to bail out the Titanic, 5,000 ICE, all this. The National Guard's not going to confiscate guns. We knew about the plans to confiscate guns with the Clintons and others because it was the military and police gave us the documents. So the idea that this Band-Aid Trump's doing or this Dixie Cup to bail the Titanic is martial law is preposterous.
Yeah, of course. But again, what Trump as president needs to do, and this is something he has not done, Alex, he needs to come clean with the American people. We need to have a briefing where he stands up and explains to the American people, this is the problem, and this is why we're taking the actions. Everybody on the left always talks about Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats. Well, his fireside chats were effective. They were short, they were straightforward and explanatory. That's what we need now from this administration. He needs to demonstrate real leadership. And I hate to say it, but I'm not seeing real leadership. When the swamp writes the script and he simply reads from it, that's not leadership, that's captivity.
I agree. And look, we just call it like we see it. I know you're not a Israel phobe, neither am I, but Israel's been a big lobby and a big problem for a while, but they've certainly in the power vacuum with the Democrats, record low polls, record low fundraising, falling apart. Israel's been really trying to fill the vacuum. So maybe before we hit Russia and the latest there, we should look at what's happened with Iran and Netanyahu still winning a war and what's developing there. And from your sources, how serious the Israeli infiltration is.
Well, we need to understand something. Gaza is not a war, Alex. It's simply mass murder with U.S. funding. Children starve and are bombed and killed while lobbyists receive fat checks. And that's outrageous nonsense. And it's not just the lobbyists, it's members of Congress. There's something really, really wrong when we're supposed to stand for freedom. We're supposed to stand for truth, justice, and the American way, as we used to say it. We should stop enabling what is absolutely genocidal killing, and we're not. We're not. We're underwriting it. We're pushing it. I don't know why President Trump will not step forward and simply tell the truth. The rest of the world knows what's happening. We're hurting ourselves. Our reputation is being destroyed. He needs to tell the truth, and all he has to do is say, "Look, I love Israel. Fine, go ahead and love Israel." And I want Israel to be successful. I don't know of anybody I've talked to that doesn't want Israel to be successful. But this is not success. This is mass murder. And they're trying to tie this to a war with Iran. And a war with Iran right now, how do I put this? It's like kicking a beehive with your bare feet. The stings are not going to land on big donors to the lobby or the members of Congress. They're going to land on our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. It's going to hurt our families in the future. The world knows what's happening. The world has sorted this out. We need to distance ourselves from this. And if President Trump said, that's it, I'm suspending lethal aid until President or Prime Minister Netanyahu reaches some sort of an agreement with his opponents, then I think it would all stop.
Well, that's right. Trump, was recently asked, do you want to end the war in Gaza? Or do you want to? And he said, well, yeah, but you got to talk to Netanyahu about that. Well, no, we're the main funder. What, 9% of it? No, we have the power, just like what we're funding, like 85% of the Ukraine war. That's why Trump said he holds the cards. Why not play the cards?
Well, isn't he the president of the United States, not Netanyahu? So at what point in time do we have to ask Mr. Netanyahu for permission to stop funding genocide, or for that matter, bankrolling a wider war with Iran? War with Iran is extremely dangerous. It's not only dangerous because right now Iran is probably stronger than it's ever been. The biggest lie that is being spread by the Israelis through the mainstream media is Iran is weak, that the population is not standing with it. That's wrong. In fact, Iran and its people are more united around the current government than they have ever been in their history. And that doesn't mean they love the mullahs. There are a lot of people in Iran that are unhappy with that. But right now, Iran, the nation itself, is under attack. It's back to regime change and balkanization. That's what the Israelis want to do. They want to turn Iran into Syria. We have no interest in seeing Iran destroyed. Iran is not our blood enemy. And this notion that it's the repository of the greatest terrorism is nonsense. The overwhelming majority of terrorism has come out of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Sunni Islamic Middle East. These aren't the people that have been trying to kill us. We somehow or another have to get the truth out. It's very, very difficult. We know everything's against us, but Washington has got to stop treating foreign policy like DoorDash, order up a new war, and then make the rest of us delivery drivers. We can't do it anymore.
So we're going to break in about 8 minutes, but let's talk in general. I've been a big Trump supporter and been tracking this. And then I know in the last few months you've gotten more and more concerned. So have I. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The good things like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and the Russiagate thing, all that's good. But at the same time, we have to then point out the bad course changes we've seen that are happening to try to push Trump back, in the right direction. What are some of the other things that have concerned you where you make a statement like, it seems he's almost like a captive president?
Well, let's look at Ukraine. He made all of these statements as he was running for election. I can stop the war in 24 hours. Well, that was ridiculous. Wars are complex. This one is more complex than perhaps any that we've encountered in decades. So the notion that something could stop in 24 hours was ridiculous. But he did get a lot of things right. He understood that this was not a war that Russia started. This is a war that began with a coup in 2014 that was staged by the CIA and run by people like Victoria Nuland. It was designed to put a new government into Ukraine that would lead a crusade against Russia, because the real objective of war in Ukraine was to destroy Russia. All you have to do is pick up Biden's speeches and read them. We want to harm Russia, destroy Russia. We want to rape it, take its resources. We want to change its government. We want to remove Putin. All this kind of craziness. We have no interest in any of that. If anything, President Trump understood very clearly in his first term and subsequently that we needed normalization with Russia. Russia is not our natural enemy. We don't want it to be an enemy. But yet, once he's gotten in, he deviated almost immediately from the path. And he doesn't seem to understand that the solution, from our standpoint, is not to try and impose a settlement, not a big splash event where everybody shakes hands and lauds Donald Trump as a Nobel Prize winner. That's not the point of American foreign policy. The point is to simply say, look, as he pointed out, I did not start this war. I do not want this war, and the American people don't support this war. So as of today, I am suspending all military aid and assistance to the Ukrainian regime and urging them to sit down with Moscow and negotiate an end to the conflict. We will support a conference. We will help sponsor it. We will implore the Poles, the Slovaks, the Hungarians, the Romanians, the people that border Ukraine to sit down with you and work out a settlement. But this has to be done by you. But we are not going to subsidize this war anymore. He could have done that a long time ago. He could do that tomorrow morning because he has to function at focus here at home. What are we dealing with? We're sending billions to Ukraine and bridges over highways are crumbling. What kind of sense is that? We have an educational system that fails miserably to provide a path to employment. What's he doing about that? The hell with all this money wasted on Ukraine. The hell with this money that's being thrown down the toilet against Iran. We're not interested in those things. What America needs is what he wants to do, or at least we thought he wanted to do here at home. He wants to secure the borders. We've started. We have a long way to go, though. We haven't stopped all the human trafficking and the drug trafficking. We haven't even brought the United States Coast Guard back to home waters. We're busy over in the South China Sea and the Persian Gulf. Insane. We need to get everybody focused on securing this country. We do need a crusade, a major one led by him against criminality in the United States. And the last thing we need to do is build a fund of almost $500 million from Trump's biggest donors designed to destroy good men like Thomas Massie or Marjorie Taylor Greene. Is just incredible. That all needs to go away.
Elaborate on what you think Trump should do.
Well, number one, let's talk about what he started and he needs to finish. First of all, he needs to come to terms with the reality that ICE cannot deport all of the illegals. There has to be a strategy to do it. What is the strategy? He's never enunciated or explained a strategy. You can't just say, okay, Tom Homan and friends, just run out there and start picking up bad guys. I'm 100% for arresting criminals first. That sounds great. But how many millions of these people are in our country? We have got to get out there and find them. And to do that, you need resources. After 1929, Herbert Hoover recognized that many, many jobs in the United States were occupied by illegal immigrants. Most of them were from Mexico. He said, I've got to get these people out of here because as the economy deteriorates, they're going to become targets for Americans who need those jobs. And so, Alex, we deported 9 million Mexicans. Franklin Roosevelt deported 3.5. Harry Truman, another 2.1, and Eisenhower about 1.2. Why? Was it because they didn't like Mexicans or Mexican food? No. It was because we needed to open jobs for Americans. And you've heard all this nonsense. Oh, Americans won't do those jobs. Look, my sons grew up stacking vegetables and putting together carts at places like Harris Teeter or Giant or somewhere else. People will do the jobs if they need the money.
Listen. I mean, I work for a large animal vet every summer from like 13, 14, 15. I would take other jobs, literally we drive out the countryside to pick green beans from 6 a.m. in the morning till 7 at night. Then they'd feed us dinner and pay us cash. The idea that Americans of any color don't know how to do agriculture is horse crap, and it's something we should get back into to be self-sufficient.
Well, here's something else. The Austrians have a law which I strongly support. I think this is something that President Trump should try to implement. He's going to get a lot of pushback, but it needs to happen. Until every American citizen who can work and has a job, we're not bringing in anybody else. Why in the world would we want all these H-1B visas for cheap software engineers from anywhere you want to go? India, Malaysia, Thailand, I don't care. Why that? Just so they can replace
and
one.
Because for those that don't know that have tried to hire software engineers, because the market's so undercut by China and India, you can't hardly find a U.S.-based software engineer because people won't do it because you can't live in this economy that's so expensive doing that job. I can literally,
That's right.
It's insane.
You have to pay people what they're worth. We've made it impossible to do that. You can go after the tax structure to adjust that.
Well, stay right there. But I want to really focus then more on Ukraine, the developments there, how big this is, how we can get this war ended, what happens if we don't. Colonel McGregor, stay with us. Alaska, looking at the statements we see, we'll hear good things out of Trump, and then we'll see a bad action. And then we'll see a good action. So it seems very schizophrenic. I remember Trump a few months ago didn't know that Ukraine had massively increased attacks inside Russia, right ahead of the last peace deal before that. Then when Trump found out, he went, oh, I didn't know they did that. Oh, now I see why Putin did it. That's just a fact. Then you had Operation Spiderweb after that. Then Trump made statements about, Lindsey Graham on a watch doing duplicitous diplomacy. That's illegal. He might get arrested. So we see Trump say incredibly good things, and he's finally turned Kennedy loose to go after the big pharma, and they're going crazy there. But then we also see all these bad things, which is what Roger Stone always says. He says if Trump's given the facts, he'll almost always do the right thing. He's not a bad guy. But at 79, I'm at 51, and I know a lot of general knowledge, but I couldn't be the president. Most people we have even shouldn't be the president. I mean, it's so complex. But, with Trump, it's a real struggle. So you've been a big booster and supporter because obviously he was the better choice than totally out of her mind Kamala Harris. But now you've been really concerned. What are the other issues you have? And then expanding on the Russia conflict, just how dangerous that is and what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and why we're seeing these schizophrenic statements.
Well, first of all, let's keep something in mind, that President Trump is not surrounded by people who are likely to tell him things that are factual. They're going to tell him what they want him to hear because they have an interest in shaping his agenda. And President Trump knows, as you point out, a number of good things about a lot of things. I mean, first of all, I would tell you that Roger's right. And certainly at home, President Trump has a good grasp on the problems that we have with illegal migration, the perils of unrestricted immigration, the problems with criminality in our cities, the problems that we have with education. I'm quite certain he understands that. Now, is he being given any assistance in terms of, all right, Mr. President, these are our recommended courses of action. Here's 1, 2, and 3. Evaluate these. Tell us which way you would like us to go. I don't think that's happening. I don't see any evidence for that. In other words, I don't see really good staff work. What I see are a lot of people that are very concerned that nothing really changed. And that means nothing really changes in Europe, nothing really changes in the Middle East, and not a whole lot changes at home. Now, he could be blamed for surrounding himself with these people, but these people were probably also placed there by big donors. So that's just the first observation, because otherwise I agree with Roger Stone. President Trump needs to understand that Ukraine is no longer a nation. It's a graveyard with a flag. And we in London are the principal perpetrators in digging those graves. We should have stopped this horrendous slaughter 2.5, 3 years ago. We didn't do it. We let it drag on. Now, that's not all his fault. Congress profited enormously from the money laundering that goes on between the defense complex and also the monies they get from various lobbies.
And he admitted, before I was getting you on, I wanted to ask this question before I forget. He admitted last week, he said, I thought it would be a lot easier to end the war than it is, but then he didn't elaborate. That's what General Flynn has said on the front of prosecuting the deep state for Russiagate and things. Trump needs to come in. He's the president. They've convinced him he can't direct the Department of Justice. He needs to have a task force battle plan, the powers they have, and then say, we have the documents from Tulsi Gabbard. You will now, here's your deadline or you're fired. He needs to be the commander-in-chief. Explain in the military what that means, because he's the head military officer, and in his executive capacity, he is the military commander. Explain as a military commander how he should be behaving. And you used to advise him. So what should he be doing?
Well, first of all, what can any president do in his term? And more important, what can he accomplish in the first 6 to 12 months of his term? Normally, everything important that a president undertakes really occurs in the first 6 to 12 months. Normally, there are no more than 3 or 4 priorities that he can actually pursue. He was diverted almost immediately into the promise of some sort of great peace moment with Ukraine and Russia that was not going to happen. Instead of listening to the Russians carefully, who tried to tell him the truth and make it clear to him that their long-term national security was at stake in Ukraine, he treated it as though, well, Ukraine's just a minor glitch. We can all sort through this. You have to listen to your opposites on the other side of the table. I don't think he did that. And when he started talking about security guarantees, I think he completely missed it. The Russians don't want to fight another war in 5 years or 10 years. They want to end this. They want a new border.
And for those that don't know, a security guarantee with NATO troops or whatever they call it is exactly what the Russians said they didn't want and exactly what they now admit they want. It's just NATO by another name.
Yeah, exactly. And look, NATO is this sort of 30-car parade with lots of choking and smoking and noise, but no engine, and the damn thing doesn't go anywhere. President Trump knows that the Europeans need to be their own first responders. In other words, they need to invest in their own countries. He also knows that the enemy is not in Russia. The enemy is in Great Britain, inside France, inside Germany, inside these European states. They threw their borders open to millions from Africa, Southwest Asia, the Middle East, and brought these people in.
We're seeing Soviet Union level tyranny in Germany, France, the UK. They just killed all the different AFD people that were set to win, all just magically died.
And AFD's principal sin is to say, we want Germany first. We want to preserve Germany, German culture, German identity, German language. We want an end to this stupid war with Russia. We want to rebuild our economy. We don't want to deindustrialize Germany and turn us into some sort of pasteurization plant. It's a catastrophe. They're really up against it because you've got the globalists led by people like Soros, and now we have Larry Fink at the WEF, the World Economic Forum, and they have a permanent interest in essentially reducing all of these countries to complete chaos, in destroying what effectively we call Western civilization. If it were not for Germany and France and Great Britain and Italy and Spain and Scandinavia, we would not even exist as a country. And, if water is purest at its source, then Europe is the fountainhead of our civilization. And what has been happening in Europe is the active destruction of that civilization. President Trump, I think, understands that. But the best way to help these people is to walk away from them, because then they'll have to deal with it. And the populations in these countries are up in arms. The longer it takes for a revolution to occur in places like France, Germany, and Britain, the more painful and bloody it will be. But if we get out of the way and say, look, these are your countries, you have to make these decisions. The destiny of your nation is in your hands. It doesn't rest in our hands. Until that happens, not much will change. And remember that this whole phony war with Russia, the fiction that Russia wants to conquer Europe, who in their right mind in Moscow?
And Colonel, I want to go to that in a moment, but since you mention it, literally, I have hundreds of videos. It would take all day to air them. Everybody's seeing them. But it's banned in the UK with the censorship law to even see these. Police pepper spraying random people, beating anybody that's white, Muslims running around attacking people. And then if you fly the Union Jack, they arrest you. If you just run up on the steps of a government building and the police then grab and manhandle the woman, then they let the Muslims literally take over buildings and fly their flags. I mean, and these women start brutalizing this lady and acting like they've arrested Satan himself, and it just goes on and on. I mean, they arrest people dozens and dozens a day for praying in public silently. But the Muslims can blast prayer at massive decibels in all the cities at midnight. And now Minneapolis has let them, now they blast call to prayer at midnight. You talk about marking territory. You talk about pissing on people. How could they get the police to cover up the Muslim rape gangs? And I mean, folks, I've been to England a few years, but I've been going there for decades. It is literally, you'll be sitting there filming Big Bend, and Muslims will walk over and scream at you and say, don't film me, even though they're not in the shot. And when you speak back to them that you've got an American accent and say, screw you, they freak out and run off because they're so used to the Brits bowing down, the Scots bowing down, the Irish bowing down. I mean, the Romans said that the Scots, the Irish, and the Brits particularly were the hardest people to conquer. They gave up. How did they take these people and turn them into the servile, but we now see that old energy awakening, and I think it spells doom for the globalists in Europe, but how do you think they'll strike back?
Well, the way they strike back is to utterly reject this sort of self-destructive policy that is in place. And the way to do that is that the police have to decide whether they are British or not. The military has to decide, are you British or not? If you're British, then protect the British people, because the individuals committing the crimes that you're describing, Alex, they're not British. If you take the position that anybody can be anything, then everybody is nothing. And that's the problem everywhere in the West. You ask the question, what's an American? And the answer from the left has always been, well, anything, anything you want. Obama told us, or not told us, but told people coming into the country, you can set up your own societies and nation states on American soil. What you're describing in Britain is also here. It just is not as widespread. We're a much larger country and people don't notice it. Why would you want Sharia law inside the United States? Why would they allow Sharia law in parts of London? That's insane. If you don't have an identity anymore, if you don't care about your country and who and what you are, those things happen. And that's what's happened in too much of Europe. And right now, Macron has done the same thing in France. Everyone is bending over backwards to accommodate the invaders. Well, the invaders need to be thrown out. That's what has to happen. That means you've got to get rid of Macron. And I do think these globalist governments in Europe, their days are numbered. What you and I are concerned about are the globalists that are still in power here inside the United States. That's our problem.
So, Colonel, shifting back, because it's all directed by the UN, BlackRock, the NGOs, the ADL, all of it, they're on record. They're exposed now. So I don't want people to think just because Trump falters some that we're losing. There's a global awakening that's intensifying that's much bigger than Trump. He just wrote in on it. But when I look at threats, I see collapse of the world economy is one of the biggest. Obvious escalation of the Ukraine war that Europe and the NATO are openly trying as some of the other big threats. Looking at that, what do you think the biggest threats are? And currently on the trajectory, where do you see the Ukraine black hole money laundering cemetery going?
Well, you just hit the nail on the head when you talked about the financial condition. I think we are very close to a financial collapse in the United States. All you have to do is look at the price of gold that is now going ballistic in the aftermath of this meeting in China, the Shanghai Cooperation Council meeting. You now have 40 to 50% of the world's population, maybe more, represented by India, China, Russia. Just go down the list, all the people that were visiting in China. They are building an alternative financial system because, frankly, most of the developed world and most of the still developing world is interested in getting out from under us because our dollar system is passing debt on to them. And we are hopelessly indebted. We're not going to retire the $37 trillion debt. And right now, Bessent is coming up with all sorts of schemes trying to figure out ways to keep this machine going. I'm afraid it's going to fail. When that financial crisis strikes and many of the supply chains no longer work and people can't afford to buy gas, they can't keep their automobiles running, they discover their dollar isn't worth anything, which is a real danger right now, not initially, but down the line. That's when you're going to get real unrest in the United States. And at that point, no one will give a damn what happens in Ukraine or anywhere beyond our borders. We'll be concerned about what happens here in the United States. I think we're getting closer to that point. But sadly, it's really financial bankruptcy that is probably going to save us from a major war in either Europe or the Middle East, or for that matter, in Asia.
Well, I know you are a learned scholar in all of this and have had a lot of accurate predictions. I just don't think the listeners, even my listeners that are very informed, even myself, because we have a normalcy bias reflex, we've had it good so long, can even comprehend the grave danger. But when I just historically, intellectually look at all the different crises factors, and you throw AI in on top of it and all of this, we're in for some wild times, and I don't see how, quite frankly, we even survive this unless the establishment realizes how much danger they're in and stops putting their foot on the gas of crises. But they have a normalcy bias of always winning, so they're doing it. So whether Atlantis existed or not 12,000 years ago and got so advanced they blew themselves up, godlike power, but they weren't gods, we are literally approaching what I call an Atlantean moment, and you can smell the doom. And I don't say that to say we're all doomed. They've done all these war games. Got a big report here where in almost every big war game with all these different government and private AIs, the AIs launch nuclear war, and then the Pentagon is putting AI in charge already. So, because it's just, my God, I look at my children and I just ask myself, because I'm not a pessimist, I'm an eternal optimist, but I think only facing the tightrope we're walking do we go over the tightrope. People act like we're on a boulevard here. We're on a tightrope.
Well, on October 4th in Dallas, we're going to deliver presentations on these topics. We're going to talk about the surveillance state, which is really at the heart of what you're discussing when it comes to AI. We're going to talk about the precarious financial condition. We're going to talk about the international strategic environment. We're going to tell people the truth. There are no great armies or navies or air forces gathering to attack us. We need to come home. We need to disengage from these pointless, self-defeating interventions. We need to give up on the regime change nonsense. We need to come home. Now, if the audience wants spin, watch CNN. But if you want survival, you need to be in that room at the Frontiers of Flight in Dallas on the 4th of October, because we're going to hit these topics and the audience will have the opportunity to stand up, raise issues, and express their opinions. This is not a one-way street. This is a two-way delivery.
Well, Colonel, I'm excited about this event. I didn't know it was happening because I want to meet you in person, and I know the other folks are going to be there and be friends with them. So tell us where people sign up for this.
Well, there's a link to the whole event where you can go on, look at it, and then decide what level
Sure,
of
sure. We'll
participation.
pull that up and we'll put it in post. We're live now. We'll post this on X and Rumble later, but I want to go to this. So tell me, what's the website? People will find it there.
Well, I've sent it to you. I don't remember it. It's the
Okay, we'll
national.
pull it up.
It's the nationalconversation.com. And if you go to that, you Google that, you'll bring this website up. And we're adding to it every day in terms of topics
No,
and
good.
material.
Well, good. What day is this event? Because I'm only 3 hours from you. I'm probably going to come up there.
Well, I hope so, Alex. It's because you're someone else who needs to stand up and express an opinion while we're there. This is the 4th of October. There'll be a cocktail reception at 5 o'clock. Then we start at 6, and it goes for 2 hours. As I said, the three of us will be a panel. We'll answer the questions, and then we want to interact with the audience because we want
Great.
to
I'm
chart.
looking forward to that. Well, just send me all the info. We'll do a plug for it later. In closing, Colonel, what is the real state of this? Because, we have France saying prepare for nuclear war for the first time ever, imminent nuclear war, putting out a national alert for hospitals to be ready for World War III and treat hundreds of wounded soldiers. It'll be a lot more than that. They say imminently Ukraine using AI-powered swarms. It just goes on and on.
And listen, this is 99% crap. Remember that Macron and Starmer and Merz, the rest of these globalists that are in power in Europe, they're grasping for straws. They're trying to justify their continuation in office. The population is beginning to figure out just how frequently and massively they've been lied to about everything. All these economies are bankrupt. They're all going to crash. All of these people are going to start a war if they can to keep themselves in office. But they can't, Alex, because the French army is organized and equipped to go on safari in Africa. The British army is an overgrown paramilitary police force. The German army is almost non-existent. It's all nonsense. The Russians know it. And that's why the Russians aren't moving further west.
And bottom line, Europe, everything you're saying, the major economic ministers and military ministers the last 2 years said, we're collapsing. All we need is a war. We'll bankrupt Russia and break them in 5 parts. That's their business model. And then literally they're a paper tiger whose only hope is to draw us in.
Well, that business model has failed miserably, hasn't it?
It has. Well, Colonel, thank you so much.